SSRIs like Prozac or Paxil, that there's a population that tries the SSRIs and they can't tolerate them because of the side effects, usually agitation or GI disturbances. And they find the effects so intense that they're useless. On the other end of the spectrum is a group that uses SSRIs and takes cannabis simultaneously for complementary responses. There are different effects on the affect by cannabis and the SSRIs, where the SSRIs appear to relieve a general lowering of mood. It's difficult to describe. The cannabis, on the other hand, appears to help to mobilize affectual response or emotional response. And that this property of mobilizing or freeing up the emotional response, as well as dampening it down, this is why I describe it as a mood modulator. That some people, it mobilizes them, they are depressed and just stuck and preoccupied with something, and the cannabis helps mobilize their emotional reactivity and permits them to be with other people. This is the other interesting part, that the SSRIs do not appear to enhance socialization, although they're claimed to, but there's the cannabis decreases stage fright in many ways. The SSRIs appear to decrease the emotional reactivity as well, but in a different way, and we need to have long-term clinical studies to follow these groups and learn more about how this works. Mm-hmm. See, I'm a clinical researcher, and my data comes strictly from interviews. Mm-hmm. That are disparaged by academic.
But anyway, you do feel like that marijuana is an effective antidepressant for a good part of the population, a good potential.
No doubt about it. It was described extensively in the literature in the 1900s, as well as different ethnographic accounts starting back in the 1200s or before. The first case was described by William O'Shaughnessy in 1839 that recounted a fakir, or the head of a monastery and a cult of self-chasteners, in other words, depressed people. And one day he went on a walk and came across this plant in the heat of the day that was thriving where all the other vegetation lay torpid. And he then ate of this plant and came back with his depression lifted. And he shared with his followers this excitement, and all of them ate the plant, and all of them were similarly helped, and that's the first story. But this is located on the road between Nishabur and Roma in Iran. Someday I want to visit there and see if they still have a cult that is flourishing, or if they've been stamped out by forces that don't like this kind of thing. But this has precedence. I mean, is this totally off the wall? Is this?
Why is it that we're always, or the government's always, people are always fighting to try to get the government to do an objective study on the efficaciousness of marijuana?
Well, because they believe the government does honest things and is operating in good faith, when in fact it's captive to all these special interests and thoroughly corrupt. Very corrupted contemporarily, not just by money, but by wanting jobs and also hegemony for one's authoritarian philosophy. Because you don't have the worker saying, I want the boss piss tested, do you?
No.
And we don't have the physicians going and demanding that the medical board be examined for their veracity. Hey, this is the good old-fashioned American model of the Salem witch trials. only translated with modern technology, but the same flawed premises that have been...
And what are those flawed premises?
Well, the demonization and the possession of people with drugs, and that this is a moral defect.
Yeah, I didn't have the camera on when we talked about that, but when you talked about that, would you go over that again?
Well, demons have always been around us, and the whole concept of demonic possession has been given to us down through the Middle Ages, and this idea of incubus and succubus coming to visit people, usually women at night, and the noxious effluvium of the night vapors carrying all these evil spirits. Now we have beliefs back then. This is part of the extraordinary delusions and madness of crowds, and we have the mass hysteria and mass mind poisonings that are possible. But back to the possession and the demonization model. So anybody can be possessed, and so if we now create a category of compounds, of chemicals, of potions that we define as demonic, it then gives us the basis for the civil asset forfeiture idea, because of the tainted property that has to be we have to save society by taking it away, by putting it under the control of responsible people. While they were doing this in the Salem witch trials, seeing whose farms they could rip off and give to the, quote, state. And so the same concept exists with urine testing, where somebody is possessed by this demon metabolite, and thus they're unfit to work. Thus morally defective, not unfit for duty, because nobody's ever proven that or really claimed that. But somehow it gets embedded in all these statutes, and we have these companies that are dependent on it. We have we're doing the laboratory services, the trainings, the medical review officers, which is the way they've corrupted the medical profession. And it's no coincidence the former head of NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Propaganda, Robert DuPont, now is a consultant wanting to examine the urine of everybody. This is right from Gullible's Travels, where the Grand Academy of Legato, they had people examining the qualities of excrement for odor, taste, color, to determine possible treasonous ideas against the king.
Could you elaborate a little more specifically about how the medical system here has been corrupted?
Oh, okay. Another source of remuneration, another source of profit, of making comments on, are these legitimate urine test results, or is there some other explanation? Thus, we give it the stamp of approval. We promulgate training sessions, and we become part of what is called forensic medicine, because this ain't for health purposes, and you don't run confirmatory panels for drug presence in the hospital. But in this world, as a certified medical review officer myself, and I could, so the other part of remuneration is testifying in court. I had to testify in court for the defendants to point out the deficiencies in the testing procedures, just as you would have the hired guns for the corporate people, as the MROs for the different airlines, et cetera, et cetera. They've really done a masterful job at embedding this in all sorts of commerce. So believe me, there are profit opportunities for the physicians out there with conscience deficiencies and desires to have more sources of income. Same category of physicians that will testify for the insurance companies, and you know who you are. I really am sorry for my profession our profession, having to stoop to these kinds of depths, because that really degrades the medical profession and our credibility. I'm pleased to say that my credibility is perhaps the highest amongst my patients, and they appreciate my being forthright